Are you looking to make a name for yourself or your business? Well, listen, getting in front of the right audience can help you grow and scale your portfolio. Whether you're trying to raise capital from investors or just get more awareness for a business, building that personal brand is going to allow you to stand out. Today, we sit down with Dominic Forth, who helps investors and entrepreneurs all over the country understand how to leverage media to grow and scale their business. If you want to learn how to get on TV, podcasts, and other outlets to grow your business, you don't want to miss this conversation right here on Multifamily Insights. Dominic Forth is the CEO of Thought Leaders America, where he helps founders, operators, and investors earn trust and raise capital through credible visibility. Now, over the last decade, he's worked with entrepreneurs across real estate, technology, healthcare, and professional services to build their personal brands through podcasts, TV, research studies, and owned media platforms. Let's welcome to the show, Dominic Forth.
John, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Dominic, it's great to get you on. I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Lots of great insights on there. But why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, so, I feel very fortunate. I started my media career in the UK. I trained with the BBC, and then I moved to America about 20 years ago, just through my passion for media. And in that time, I've worked for TV stations all across the US. So I started in Kansas City, then with the Tampa Bay market in Florida, then I was in San Francisco in California, then in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then Denver, Colorado. So a whole snapshot of the US. But I think the biggest piece of value that I bring is after working at local stations, I started consulting for a research group where I then took a high level position for a research company where I was working with 40 TV stations, very high level market research studies. And so in that time, what I learned was, and this is the value I'm hoping to provide today, but what makes a news story and where do they fall short? Like why does one person get on the news and the other person doesn't?
Hmm.
And then when somebody does, what's the messaging that really takes it to that next level where someone's not just reading the article or watching the show, but they're calling somebody else in from the other room or they're passing the magazine to someone to read. And so I feel very fortunate, really. I mean, over the last 20 years, I've worked with some of the best in the industry. And during COVID, like many people, saw a disruption in the market. And I've joined the Thought Leaders America team now as CEO. And we've got a lot of good things cooking. But my main goal today is just to help your audience and just provide as much value as I can.
Yeah, Dominic, I love hearing about your background, right? You talked about being overseas, that's overseas for us, right? But being up in the UK, worked for BBC, then coming over to America, worked for a lot of local TV stations and really just understanding what it takes to kind of build a personal brand and stand out. You said two things. One was, what does it take to land on TV? Why does one story get picked up and another doesn't? And then what does it take to have a story that's so compelling that it makes others want to share it, right? Calling somebody else into the room. Let's start there, right? Because I think this notion of, getting on TV, especially for, younger folks, or at least folks who maybe aren't as familiar with media, it just seems like a very out there idea, right? So just break that down. Like, what does it take to get on TV? And specifically from a business standpoint, right? We're not talking about just like random news stories where you just happen to be the person on the scene. But like, if you've got a business you're trying to market, you're trying to build a personal brand, you're trying to build a reputation as an expert in your given field, what does it take to make it where your story gets picked up by an outlet?
Yeah, I've seen a huge shift over the last probably 10 years where in the past, like you said, you could be on TV once, sometimes as a fluke, and the phone will be ringing off the hook for a retail location. People will be out the door. And then what sort of happened was there was a transition very heavily into social media and other outlets. Suddenly, everybody's creating their own content. And there's been a swerve back, I feel, to really high credible media. And the big driver behind that is AI. Because now with AI, people aren't going to Google as much. They're going to AI to ask questions. And AI is pulling its information from credible news sources. So we have seen a kind of shift back. But the beauty of timing right now is you get all the benefits of the credibility of being on, let's just say ABC or CBS or Fox. You appear there, but AI is now finding that online, using it to answer questions that people are putting in. And then with your own digital marketing channels, that one interview that lasted maybe 5 minutes that can live on and on and on as a really powerful marketing asset as well. So it's a
Yeah,
great time. Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand, right? Because you're talking about a couple things, and not to get too into the weeds, right? But first of all, with AI is not Google, right? It's not just taking your Google ranking and where your website comes up. AI is really looking for that credibility, and that's so important now and moving forward because it's harder to manipulate. And we don't all know, the prompts or what AI is looking for, utilize, and to say, hey, this is more credible than others. So if you can use those noted sources and get on those outlets, that's going to help you tremendously. And then you talked about the other part, right? If you have an ABC interview or something that you've done even locally for your local affiliate, that's something that you can put on your website. That's something that can last for years and years, and you can reap the benefits because it's still going to be referred to and kind of position you as the expert in that field. When you are kind of working with your clients, right? First of all, let's talk a little bit more about Thought Leaders America, kind of the work you do and kind of how this starts to come into play for them.
Yeah. And so the beauty of what we do is whether you're just starting out in your career and your journey, or whether you're really well established, we can help up the whole range. And what we do is we first of all want to find the story, the personal story. I mean, there's so many stories we have inside of us that we think, oh, no one would be interested in that. That's oh, no one would care to hear that. And yeah, often we're working with founders of companies. They have this great business story, but they're missing the personal story. And so the three things I like to bring out of people is number one, who they are. So that personal story. Number two is what they do. And then the third one is how they understand either their client's journey or the investors they're trying to reach, how they understand that end person they're trying to reach. And, quite often you'll see two out of three of these, but most people don't hit all three. And so there's a whole range of ways of doing this. And that's the main way is, I would say, having a series of interviews. And you can talk about different elements. Like you could talk in one interview about your personal story and how that came to put you onto this journey. Another one could be more focused, could be a very simple checklist, 5 ways to make sure your next investment hits a home run. Because then you see how that's show, or just a feature on you and the company. So there's very easy ways to hit all three pillars. But what we do is do that deep dive first, because you'd be amazed at how many things people are sitting on that are absolute valuable, so much valuable, like gold, golden nuggets that they're not sharing. And so we bring those stories out, but it has to be done in a special way so it gets the attention of a journalist, or it gets the attention of a producer, and so forth.
Dominic, you said there are three things that you focus on, right? So three questions really. So it's who you are, what you do, and how you understand or how you relate to your target audience, right? Whether that's investors, customers, how can you connect with them, right? When we talk about our story, you know, I always think of like those remarkable stories, right? The folks overcoming life, death experiences to create something new and all of that, right? But I also know that it doesn't have to be that. Can you talk about why we all have a story, and maybe it's not this notion that let me say it differently. I think the pushback many people give is their story is not that unique or is not that special. Can you share your thoughts and opinions on that?
Yes. We don't all have to have near death experiences while summiting Mount Everest. And, I think the key is you have to be audience centric with your approach. And sometimes, so I've got three actually I can talk through on this step.
Yep.
So, how do we take that journey to be audience centric? And it might be the service that you offer. How do we make that relatable to the audience? Because a journalist is trying to report to really serve their audience. So if you can meet the journalist halfway or three-quarters of the way and say, hey, I'm seeing trends here, and I think this would be really valuable for your readers. I've noticed these 5 things happening. And if you pre-write the article sometimes, you'll get the call. They'll clarify what you're talking about, and very often it gets published. So the first thing is audience centric. Now, the way you make that more effective is it has to be emotionally engaging. And so that's quite often where the personal story will come in, and it doesn't have to be, like I say, an injury or an accident you've overcome. It could just be that, you've spent 10,000 hours studying this topic, which makes you an expert. I mean, it could be that there's something, I say as simple, I don't want to describe 10,000 hours, obviously is a lot, but just something that shows that you've done your homework, you have the experience. But the third piece where people fall short, and this is really interesting because you see this a lot on TV, but when you have this message, you have to be authentic. So audience centric, box checked, you're emotionally engaging, but if you're not authentic, it all falls apart. So that's the one piece I always stress with people. Like, don't try and be someone that you're not. Just be authentic, because we've seen it so many times that authenticity is so relatable and people connect with. And that's why I think a lot of people often surprise others because they succeed just by being authentic.
So you're talking about being authentic, relating to your audience. Again, the pushback, I'm listening to the people in my head saying, that doesn't sound like a great story, right? Like I'm just another guy or I'm just another woman. What's so interesting about that?
I see. So you mean, so somebody wants to be featured and they just feel like they see the value of PR and see the value of media placement, but they're worried that they can't get placed, or, well, nobody would want to talk to me,
Exactly.
right? So you know what you need then? You need either a coach or a friend who can connect you with somebody to get you featured,
Yeah.
because it's such a big relationship business. And I've got a great example actually. I had a book author approach me with a topic on psychedelics. And he's like, no one will talk to me because they think I'm trying to talk about how it helps PTSD and it helps stress. But the minute they hear that topic, the phone clicks. And I said, oh, well, let me speak to a few people. And within a week, I had him 3 TV interviews booked because I
Wow.
was able to explain, like, hey, we're not talking about magic mushrooms in music festivals. This is about clinical grade research. He's got a whole book published. He has all this research. And he was like, this is amazing. You can do this. And so that is the difference, is you having that insider access where obviously the people we're talking about, they do have a story because they're committed, they're driven, they want to be better. And so it's then having that final piece of someone who can connect you to the right people.
And Dominic, the thing I love too is like that outside person, because sometimes we're so involved in our story that we can't see it, right? We don't know the story because we're the main character. You don't know your story. So having that outsider who can take a look and understand more about you, what you've experienced, what you've gone through, how you've gotten to where you're at, that person can craft a narrative that you just wouldn't, right? Like we just went through this with my wife, right? We just launched a restoration business, and I was doing a pitch for her for media, and in going through that process, like she was really taken aback because hadn't really thought about her story from that perspective, right? This is someone who was in corporate America for a long time, lost her mom, and that experience really made her want to reevaluate how she was spending her time. We kind of took a step back and made some decisions, but that part of the story is just reflecting about serving, about letting people down. It's about, taking control over your life. And there are a lot of different elements that, to your point, the emotion people can relate to, people can understand, because we've all been in a situation where we feel like, man, I'm not being valued or I don't feel worthy. How do I shift this? How do I take more control over my life? And that's something I think people can resonate with. But sometimes we don't see our story that way, right? We just see ourselves as just trying to figure out life, right? Just trying to make make it to the next day and trying to make the best decision you can, which is why it's so important to have someone like Dominic who can understand your story, understand what you're trying to accomplish, and help tell and craft that narrative for a different audience.
Yeah, yeah. I don't pitch myself. I can't pitch myself because we have so many blind spots that we're
Yeah.
not aware of. And you can second guess yourself as well. Like as you mentioned, sometimes like, oh well, no one will find that interesting. And as you're sharing a story, people are like, oh my goodness, wait, what happened? And how did you react? And everybody's leaned in, and you're like, oh, I didn't think anyone would be interested in this.
Yeah. What do some of your clients like almost sabotage themselves in this process where like you're starting to craft this narrative and maybe they want to pull it back because ooh it just sounds too much?
There's been a couple where there's been something raw emotionally, which I've said you've got to bring that to the surface,
Yeah.
and they've said, "Oh, I really don't want to. I've got that part has to remain private," and we do respect that.
Yeah.
If we have enough to work with, um, but I think the biggest challenge can be people over prepare for interviews.
Yeah.
Which I know sounds kind of like, wait, over prepare? Because what can
Yeah.
happen is we'll get an interview set up, and with our process, we'll actually have a pre-list of questions where we'll say, John, you've got these 5 questions. These aren't going to be said word for word, but this is what the producers agreed upon. And then something can happen between the time the questions get confirmed and then the actual interview. And for whatever reason, the host might have had too much coffee that day, or there was a traffic jam, or something's happened in the mix. And the first question you're expecting is something completely different.
Yeah.
Or question 3 starts the interview. They decided to change the order.
Yeah.
And so when someone's over prepared, what they often you see in the conversation is, and I've done this myself as well, you try and like fight to get onto what you want to talk about,
Yeah.
and sometimes we'll have to coach people after the interview because they'll say, "Oh, I had these 3 points prepared, but I only got to say two.
Yeah.
They didn't go well." And then we'll just say, "Well, hang on a minute. Let's zoom out for a second, because the viewer at home doesn't know you had those 3 points. The viewer at home saw the two that you did bring up, and they think that's great. Like, oh my god, I got 2 golden nuggets here. This is really helpful." And so people often beat themselves up, and the reality, and like you say, having a third party perspective helps in so many ways because the viewer says that was great. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah. And Dominic, too, I think, one, being over prepared, that's always a challenge, especially when you're creating content, because you have no idea where the conversation is going to go. You can prepare and have a script and, all that together. But like you said, anything can throw it off. So you certainly want to be prepared, but not over prepared. And part of what I think we're getting at is really almost this, imposter syndrome, where when you start talking about being a quote unquote expert, even if you know your field extremely well, going on camera and speaking as almost an authority figure, that can be somewhat alerting for some people. And many of our listeners are looking to be multifamily investors, and we always talk about building a thought leadership platform, and the feedback or pushback I always get is, well, I haven't done enough in the space. I don't want to just start jumping on podcasts, and I don't want to start doing all these things. And we always talk about the importance of sharing your story. It doesn't need to be I'm a multifamily expert, because I'm not a multifamily expert. Even though I've done over $100 million worth of multifamily, I'm not a multifamily expert. I've certainly know more than 98% of maybe 99% of the population, but I don't label myself that way because I feel like this is a thing where you're constantly learning. You're always getting feedback. You're always adjusting based on real time information, right? But that imposter syndrome, it paralyzes so many people to never take action to build that personal brand. Can you talk about that aspect and anything that we can do to maybe overcome that?
Yes, because I hear that a lot too, and we offer a lot of coaching around that, just to help people get a few practice runs in. We'll actually book interviews with TV stations that we know are going to run longer, like 7 to 9 minutes, just to get some reps in. Because when you get onto a big station like Washington DC, you might only get 3 minutes to prep, and so having those sort of at bats first with smaller markets really help. But you make a great point. The imposter syndrome and the mentality and mindset. I often think like so much value is given not by the person who's done it all, who's the top dog, but those people who are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. I often find that's almost just as valuable because the person who's 12 steps ahead of you, and especially people who've grown big platforms, you don't get access to those people. They're not living the same life you're living. Yes, they might have made some of the same mistakes, but they're not in the trenches with you right now. And so those people 1 or 2 steps ahead, I feel is so valuable because you usually do get access to those people and they know exactly the journey that you're on. So that's why I think it's so powerful to share because you just never know which piece of information is going to resonate with people. And would you agree as well? The failures are often more important than the
Oh,
successes as
absolutely.
well.
Absolutely. And Dominic, your point on the people just a few steps ahead of you, It's so spot on because I will tell you, even for us on this show, like sometimes we bring on guests who've done $1 billion worth of real estate and it sounds amazing. But the reality is for the guy who's trying to do his first apartment deal, like there's a fairly big disconnect on like how to go from here to here when this person is already almost on a different planet. I was reading like something on X today, and this guy was talking about how he would build a, passive, like $100,000 in passive income through these boring businesses. And he said, well, I would start with the cleaning business and I would do this and I would hire one, I would start one, reliable cleaner. And then I'm like, well, stop. There's no step three. Step number one is the hardest step.
Yeah.
So he went on with all these other steps. I'm like, that's not the problem most people have. Step one is extremely difficult, right? That's like saying, hey, if you're going to go to the NBA, all you have to do is blah, blah, blah. Okay, be 6'5". Well, that's a pretty important first step that will stop most people from making it. So I say that because your point on that person who's just a step or two ahead of you, they have way more nuance of how to do that first step or that next step. Where I think those folks who are maybe 5, 10, 15 years removed from that, they've forgotten. They've forgotten how to find an attorney. They have forgotten how to host an event. They have forgotten how to secure that first investor. So we always try to stay rooted in that too, because I think if you don't, you kind of get disconnected from some of those steps and it becomes easy for you in theory, but you don't remember how hard it was, especially the mental side of it, right? Because yeah, you can tell me just call 100 people. If you're not a salesperson, if you have a hard time being rejected and people telling you no and go F off, that's not something that's going to be easy for you. And to help people go through that process to get comfortable facing rejection, putting themselves out there, that takes time. Again, maybe you got the mindset for it, but a lot of people are not geared to hear no over and over and over and just telling people to do it and suck it up. It's not sufficient. You got to be able to help guide them through that process. And you can only do that if you're not that far removed from it or you stay close to helping people go through that process.
Yeah, well, and those 100 calls, what the person who's at the top, what worked for them 5 years ago, it may not work right now. Might be whole new tactics and techniques are needed. So
No.
I agree. I think we all have different journeys that we take, and just because you're not the number one in a category does not mean that people don't want to learn from you. I think often, like you say, the closer you are to somebody, the more value you can bring.
Yeah. And I love going back to what you said on the personal story, right? It's who you are, what you do, and how you can understand or relate to your target audience. We all have a unique story. And for some people, it's just being able to see themselves in you, right? In your journey, or seeing how you may be able to help them with a problem or challenge that they're facing in their own story. So that connectivity and being able to share that helps tremendously. Talk to me about what you do with thought leaders, right? So when you look at Thought Leaders America, what does the platform actually entail?
Yeah, yeah. And so, what caused us to launch the journey, you Thought Leaders America, was everyone has these incredible stories inside of them, and we feel that like just one story can transform lives. And you see so much conflict and crime reported on TV. We advocate for the good guys and the good actors who are truly trying to make the world a better place. And so the key part of what we do is build out that narrative, build out what the end goal is, and then we get to work. And so what we'll do is we'll reach out to our network, and usually within 3 weeks we come back with the first booking, sometimes faster. But once that booking's made, then we focus on coaching. So everything from what to wear. We practice sound bites. We actually have a micro SaaS platform where you can literally just do a whole brain dump about all the things you want to talk about, and it will crystallize into some really cool sound bites that you can use during the interview. So I'll give you an example if you like. I put my LinkedIn bio in, and it came back and it said, in a world where chasing attention and clicks are cheap, building trust is priceless. And I was like, I've got to use that in an interview because it sounds great,
That
much
is
more
great.
articulate than I could make it. And so it builds that out. And so once the client feels good about it, then they'll go on to the first interview. And then from there, we do a debrief. How did it go? And everyone's always like, oh, I should have said this. I should have said
Yeah.
that. And we're like, no, it looks great. You did a great job. And then it snowballs from there. And some go down the podcast path. Some just want to do TV. Our biggest clients, though, what we'll do is we'll actually commission research studies for them about their industry. We'll survey 1,000 Americans based off what their target demographics are, come back with that data, and then we take that data to news stations where they then pick up the story. So we're creating the news with all the research that's coming back, and then our client is then the expert that comments on the research study. And so that's a really powerful technique we've used as well. And from there, it's the sky's the limit. It's just what the goals are. I will say, and I know this is a long answer, so I apologize, but most PR firms are just focused on visibility. And I did want to stress that visibility for the sake of visibility isn't going to be as effective as working with someone who understands the importance of ROI. So everything that we do, the placements, the goal is to ultimately, how do we help turn this asset into measurable ROI for you? And it varies by industry, but I think for your audience, having a really strong series of articles on you online where someone Googles your name and you see an investor, they look you up and they're like, oh, this guy's the real deal. Yeah, I'll take this call. I'll take that meeting. You get a 10x ROI just from that one meeting alone.
Yeah,
So
I think that's spot on, right? It's just building up that social credibility and recognizing that, you definitely want to stand out in the crowded marketplace, and that's one of the things. It's all about ROI, not just about the presence. Last question here: can you just talk a little more about the number side, right? So, like, what are you typically shooting for clients? Like, maybe you have a win with a client that was great as far as what it did to their business, and then what does it take to actually work with someone like you? What kind of investment is that?
yeah, so we have two approaches that we take. So we have package rates, which is a 136 package, super simple, like a book author. They just want 3 media interviews to promote the book. And so those packages they range from 7,500 all the way to, if they buy six, it then increases it. It's about 30K for six. And obviously, for viewers of this show, we're happy to offer a special 10% discount off that. Um, for retainers, though, for people who want to be consistent, the key with that is really very custom. And I don't, I just really need to understand what the goals are ultimately.
Yep.
Some clients, they want to go on to speaking events and get paid to get booked on stage. Others, it might be simply just to have assets that they can email to potential investors to help turn them into deals. So it's understanding what the goals are. And then what we'll do for the retainers is we'll assign either a publicist or a media booker, sometimes both, researcher if we want to go the research route from there. So yeah, it's a very scalable model for budgets.
I love it. Do you have a case study or a highlight you want to share?
Yeah, we've got quite a few. I was just on the New York Stock Exchange on Thursday, and it's for a new biotech company. That was a very signature moment because it's one of the most iconic venues to have an interview. We had a host from she's reported for Fox Business, she's reported for Bloomberg. So I was on the stock exchange floor for that. They're seeking funding. I mean, they're going to achieve their funding goal. No doubts about that. I also worked with a software company for 2 years. Right when they started, we got them some initial press to begin with, and they got funding. It took them about 18 months, but they used those clips to then secure. Well, we can't take credit for the funding. They got the funding, but we
Yeah.
were just one piece of the puzzle. But yeah, we've had book authors go on to be Amazon bestsellers.
Okay.
And we've worked with in real estate. I had a client. We were telling his story on podcasts, and then a reporter who had reported for the Wall Street Journal heard his story. He got featured not in the Wall Street Journal because she left that, but she works for a real estate magazine, and so we saw this snowball effect with him. And so we've helped companies raise millions of dollars, and we've also helped solopreneurs get major media coverage as well, and everything in between.
I love it. Dominic, great stuff there. If you want to check them out, you can go to Thought Leaders America, Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I'm sure the website as well. Dominic, right now we're going to transition and go to our round of insights. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So, Dominic, this is a kind of a lightning round of questions. All right, here we go. When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to the show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
So this is something I know it's a lightning round. I lost my cool once with a boss, and I ended up quitting the job 2 days later. And I was like, what have I done? And it then set my way into this journey that I'm on right now.
All right.
Yep.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
I hate to say ChatGPT because it's so prevalent, but it's been such an accelerator for our business.
ChatGPT it is. All right, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I emailed this to a bunch of friends when I read it, and I was like, wow, it's basically 19 essays that the author writes.
Oh, okay.
And each one argues the point and counterpoint. So one of the arguments is that we have control over every outcome. You know, we can make a big difference to the world. Then the next chapter is everything is predetermined. The universe is on its course, and we're just merely acting out things. So it really expands your mind. I will say, if you want to edit this, I'd say one of the best communications books I've read was Crucial Conversations. I read that at a young age. It helps with mediation. It helps conflict mediation. It helps you express goals of communication. That was a really good book.
All right, Crucial Conversations. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
I started getting up at 4 a.m. recently. I'm not a morning person at all, and it's been the best thing I've ever done.
I love it. 4 a.m. club. All right, give me your number 1 insight for earning, let's just call it, let me say it differently. Give me your number 1 insight for standing out using PR.
You have to be authentic. You have to be yourself, which is difficult for a lot of people, but over time, authenticity always wins.
I love it. All right. I didn't ask you this earlier, but where are you located right now?
I'm in Sarasota, in Florida.
Sarasota. Okay. Give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Yeah, I've got 2 young kids at home, so my restaurants have varied a lot, but there's a great restaurant here called Sage, and it's got a really rotating menu, really cool vibe and interior, and the rooftop bar is always great after dinner. You get a nice sunset if you go early, or sunset before dinner.
All right, Sage it is. Sounds like a great spot. I know sounds like you don't get there that often with the 2 little ones, but I understand completely. Well, a lot of good stuff, Dominic, man. You talked about just the importance of understanding media. What does it take to stand out and actually to get on, TV, to earn some reputation, earn and build your credibility, build a reputation, get in front of the press, and have a message that actually resonates. You talked about the 3 things, right? So who you are, what you do, and how do you connect to others. Those are the 3 things we have to keep in mind when we're kind of pitching our story, and working with someone like yourself and your team, where we can get in front of ourselves and get in front of an audience, but also not, self-sabotage or get in our own way, because we all have a unique story. We just may not know or see it directly. So you need that outsider to kind of take a look at it and pull that story out. Again, for folks that want to learn more, check out Thought Leaders America. We'll put links to it in our show notes below. Thank you again for being a great guest to come on the show today. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and we hope you have a great day.